And welcome to another episode of Live and Loose here in the Edge Entertainment Australia studios. I am joined by, as always, the mischievous Mr. Sean Bennett from the Rockpit. Sir, how are you?
I'm very well indeed. I'm amazed by all this technology we have around us today.
I tell you what, it feels like I've been speeding down Kwinana Freeway with all these cameras we've got pointed at us. This is an inaugural show for us because we've never done this before. We've decided to get a little bit of rock royalty, so to speak. A new record holder here for the Edge Entertainment Live and Loose show. We have Paul and Corey from SkinInc. Gents, how are we?
Good. How you going? It's good to be here.
Hey, great to be here with you.
Okay, and just
kind of.
Yeah, just clarifying, Paul is in a hotel on the East Coast living his best life, completely rockstar. Would that be correct?
Well, I wouldn't say a hotel, more of a manor.
Things are going well in the music industry.
Oh, I tell you what, I have so many questions. Obviously, this is all about talking about the band that has made the longest hiatus now for us coming back in. 20 years now, you guys hold the record. Firstly, my first statement is, why did it take so long? And secondly is, when are we going to hear the new stuff?
Did you want to do this, Paul? Go for it.
There you go. All right. Well, why did it take so long? Well, I was the one that kind of sent the band into hiatus. It was back at the end of the year 2000, I decided to make a move from the West Coast in Perth there over to here in Melbourne. I just kind of got sick of touring artists not coming across the Nullarbor and just missing out on seeing so many bands that I loved and stuff like that. And I had a work opportunity to relocate as well. So time was just right for me, and at the time, all the guys in the band were pretty keen on making the move as well and following over. But you know, it's a pretty big move to do, and it just kind of never happened. So I stayed over here, you know, without my band. So I had a choice. I could either try and find some new band members over here in Melbourne in a new city. But what I ended up doing was deciding against that because, you know, the chemistry can be pretty difficult to find the right people to play with. So I started DJing instead. And, you know, like for 12 years I was DJing in AC/DC Lane at Cherry Bar and stuff like that. So I've been doing a lot of other things in between. And then time just kind of went by. It disappeared, and before you know it, 2 decades had gone by.
Wow.
How did that conversation start to reform? Like, and sort of, I suppose the leading question to that is, being mindful of the existing band members, I should say, to the band members you have now. How has that dynamic changed? Because I know Corey was the original rhythm guitarist.
Yeah.
You had obviously yourself on vocals. You had Stevie as lead guitar. You had Matt as the drummer. And then the bass position changed. Is that correct?
Yep.
That's right. Yeah.
So,
Corey, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Jeff had been sick. Unfortunately, his family on his mum's side had a disease that kind of kept travelling through the family.
Yep.
And his mum and uncles had died in their mid-40s.
Wow.
And Jeff found out, I think, in his 20s that he definitely had it. And as time was going by, you could see him kind of slowly start to deteriorate, which was really sad because Jeff's such a great guy, you know, great player. But he didn't really start going downhill until after the band had stopped playing. It was probably about a year after that where he really couldn't play anymore. Yeah. So it was quite unfortunate to watch him go through that, and he ended up passing away in 2016, which was really sad. So obviously the band hadn't been together for quite a while at that point. But Jeff was always, and always will be, a member of SkinInc, you know. He was so gung-ho for the band, and, he, you know, as Paul would back it up, he was just such a character, and, you know, he always made us laugh just with his ways, his natural ways, and just a great songwriter. Yep. Had great songs that he put in towards the band. Great guy, and really sad to lose him. He was a good friend of mine. We'd been in bands together on and off since we were 17. So I'd plenty of experience playing with Jeff, you know, and to have him in SkinInc was really good. Like he really was the right guy at the time when we put the band together. Cool. And but
so
we miss
how did
him.
you guys form together? Because you're all essentially all younger mates. Because you had a meteoric rise in the late 90s. Like you guys went from 0 to 100 in like 6 to 8 months. So was it always? I read the bio and it was extremely impressive what you'd done in such a short period of time. Was it a couple of mates just getting together and going, rightio, let's put together a rock band? Like how did that conversation start for SkinInc?
Well, I know that Paul and Steve were talking, and then I had demos that I wanted to record, and I said to Steve, look, can you help me with some demos I got? Yeah, no worries, come over. And I was at his house for about 15 minutes, and he was like, oh, I'll show you this thing I've got. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, Paul, what's the starter band? By the time I'd walked out of his unit, we had already put the initial foundation down for SkinInc. So I actually went there to do my own stuff and ended up walking out, starting a new band. And I knew Paul was going to be a part of it. And Steve said to me, look, do you know any drummers and bass players? And I went, Maddie and Jeff, you know.
Yeah.
And we already all knew each other. And a few of us had already played in bands with each other before.
Yeah.
So, but I think Paul and Steve had the initial conversation about it, though. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of pieces here. So Corey and I met in Dada Records back in 88 or something like that.
Yeah.
I'd gone to, I think it was Twilight Records, and bought the import version of Skid Row's first album. And I just loved that album so much. I wanted to buy a Skid Row t-shirt, but nowhere in Perth was selling them. They kind of didn't exist. So I actually screen printed my own t-shirt, went down the photocopying shop, blew up the logo, and it was just a big Skid Row red logo on a black t-shirt. And I was in Dada's one day. Corey walked in and he was like, holy shit, you know that band? Like, and that was it.
That's amazing.
That's cool.
That's kind of how Corey and I met back then. And the way that I met Steve was I was putting together the world's first tribute CD to Motley Crew.
Yeah.
And Steve got in touch with me because he was in a band called Atmosphere at the time with Shane, who's now our bass player.
Yeah.
So this is where it goes back. We all knew each other kind of thing. So, and Atmosphere's, worked on a song to contribute for that CD, which didn't make the final album. The record label in Chicago decided to leave that one off as a bonus track. But then doing that at Steve's, I was around his place in Rivervale, and I'd played in a punk band back in like 87 or something in Perth. We used to play with Cremator. We were called Barbary Corsairs. But since then, I hadn't sung in any bands, but I was kind of keen to get back into it. And I had this kind of idea in my head that wouldn't it be great to kind of have myself singing on a CD? So I said to Steve, I said, hey, I wouldn't mind kind of, having a bit of a sing, when he was showing me all his gear and equipment that he had at his place. So, he had a song called I'll Be the Rocket that he'd written, and gave me the lyrics and said, have a go at this. So that night I walked out of there with a burned CD of me singing it to his music, and I got home and I said to my wife, all right, well, there's that. That's done.
Tick that off my bucket list.
Instant rock star.
Yeah. But that was really the start, and then as Corey said, him and Steve were talking, and it all just came together really quickly from there.
Well, the funny thing is that they were working on Rocket. Me and Steve were working on the other song called Life, which was also on our first EP. Oh. So we were kind of working separately at the start, but then, Steve goes, look, we're going to get Paul in and we'll get some guys together and see how we go. And it just really rolled out from there and didn't really stop for 2 years.
So do you think that the fact that you guys all kind of knew each other in that respect gave you that natural chemistry that probably helped that quick rise to suddenly doing what you were doing in that 8 months?
I think we definitely had the respect for each other because we knew each other, through the scene and through parties and just hanging out. Like Paul used to have a lot of parties at his house, like we'd have Kiss nights and stuff. And so, we'd all get around there, and Jeff would be there in the corner reading History all night while the rest of us were getting on it, But so it all came together basically as a bunch of friends. But we all knew each other pretty well beforehand.
Yeah, cool.
So it must have been Sorry, keep going.
I was just going to say, we're all massive Kiss fans, but there's also a lot of other bands from that kind of, 80s metal scene as well. But we also had our own different kind of vibe as well. So I was more heavily on the Motley Crew kind of side. Corey was big into Marilyn Manson back in those days, and some of that industrial influence into the music, what was going on. And Steve was big into Ozzy and Zakk Wylde's guitar playing. He does those little pick squeals and stuff like that. So there's that influence in there. Matty, AC/DC, Four on the Floor kind of thing. So we all each had our own little kind of nuances, but all within that same kind of, we loved our 70s and 80s rock, and big in the kind of hair metal side of things. We all love that,
You can actually see that really, really prevalent, particularly in the first sort of EP that you brought out. The influences of almost that early Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Led Zepp, even like sort of dancing around the Metallica sort of early genre of stuff, it's really interesting to see that, because at that time in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, there wasn't a lot of that. We started to hit that sort of peak of grunge, and everything went a little bit, in one term, soft. And I remember reading some of the reviews that you guys had, particularly when you were doing the late 90s stuff and Big Day Out. You either had people that loved you or hated you. And it was, some of the reviews were vicious. Like, they were like, best band ever. It's great to see these guys playing true rock and roll. We love the Australian twang put on it. And then the next review down was, yep, complete trash. Don't waste your money. It was
hot and cold.
Oh, it was. But the people that loved you and supported you were extremely diehard in that respect. The video clip that you've got up now on your basically your internet page at SkinIncRocks.com has a really cool video clip, Swan Song. Now, that has a lot of old footage and a lot of new footage. It seemed to me like it was a very good juxtaposition between old versus new, and it's done extremely well in the sense that you can see how the band members from essentially would have been late teens, early 20s transversed into people might have been essentially a little bit older now, but it's just
being very nice.
Late 20s.
Yeah, it's just
late
older.
20s, early 30s.
You know what I mean? Look, age is just a number, right?
Yeah,
it's just
right.
cooler people with more tattoos at the end of the day. Was it good to have a look at that old footage and go through it? Like, it would have been awesome to relive that moment of just the meteoric rise you guys had from playing a Paramount gig to going 8 months later to playing Big Day Out. Like, you don't hear of that hardly anymore.
It's the fairy tale story.
Yeah, it was a real trip down memory lane, putting that together. I mean, we decided, probably about halfway during last year that the time was right for us to get back together again. I think, one of the things that this whole pandemic brought about was a lot of time on our hands to be a lot more self-reflective and question, what we're doing. It just so happened that the timing, with Corey and I, we're both separated from our wives. So we found ourselves in this strange world of being kind of single guys again. And as I've always done through hard times in my life, I turn to rock and roll, and I really do feel it's my saviour. So, there was more of a focus and emphasis on the music side again. And I've always been the kind of person that can't just sit back and consume. I need to create. So the time was right to start the conversation again. And Corey drove a lot of that conversation with the guys in bringing us all together as the glue. So when we decided we'd have another crack at it, we put a bit of a kind of a strategy together and talked about, what are our goals? What do we want to do? How can we have fun doing this? And then it was like, all right, we need to write some new songs. So let's see how the new songwriting goes. And we just picked it up bang like that. Again, we're all pretty seasoned now, and we're all contributing, and the song's coming together really well. But obviously it's going to take a while to kind of get new material together and stuff like that. So I started thinking about what can we do to kind of bridge that gap and try and get the ball rolling and, grease the gears and start to build a digital fan base online and stuff like that. So had the idea of putting together a compilation album I put the EP, the Love Me Tomorrow EP, and the Rose Coloured Glasses album, get those up on all the streaming and digital download sites. But then something new, we put together a compilation album, and it's a bit of a kind of tongue-in-cheek, we called it a limited Japanese edition, kind of had a rising sun on there and stuff like that, and had a bit of fun with it. Rock and roll needs to be fun as well.
Yeah.
So we did that to try and pass some time and give people something along the way. So then it came time to let's do a video as well. So one of the things that we always did was, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever we played a show, we had a couple of mates, Nick Hatton and the late Greg Davies, who would always bring their video cameras and just kind of follow us around and hang out with us before the show and after the show and film the show and stuff like that. And we used to watch the videos of the show over again to try and learn, and see, what looks good, what sounded good, where we could improve, stuff like that. We used it as an improvement tool. But we also thought it would be great to have all that footage kind of in the archives and do something with it at some point, but we never really did anything with it. We were always fans of kind of the metal bands doing the home video releases on the VHS tapes. And thought, maybe we can put one of them out down the track, So I went through all that old footage. I digitized it all before I moved to New York a number of years ago, because I had to get rid of all my videotapes. I couldn't ship them over to New York as well. So I digitized it all. So I had it all there. So I went through it all and chopped it all up, basically kept all the good bits from all the live shows that we did, and then went through and kept all the best moments of the backstage footage before and after shows. And that was like 20 minutes worth, and I had about an hour's worth of live footage. Then I just sent it off to my video guys and just said, here's all archive footage, put together a bit of a retrospective compilation of us goofing around, having fun that kind of represents the band in those old days. But because we didn't have really good footage of doing Swan Song live, because it was actually the last song that we wrote and recorded, the last song on the album, it was our finale. At that point, we knew that I was moving and the band would likely be done, so that was our Swan Song to go out with.
Yeah.
So we didn't actually have footage of us playing that song live. So I just jumped into a studio over here in Melbourne and filmed like 3 takes of me singing it now, so that we've got that as kind of the track. So, it looks right with me singing along to it. And we just mixed that in with all the old archive footage. Yeah. And I think it turned out great. It's a good mix of old and a bit of the new as a real segue into, that's the past. We're done with that now. Now we're ramping up to release all the new stuff and move forward into the new era.
Yeah. Which is exciting.
It is. I'm actually, I love the video. I reckon it's a really good representation of where you've been to where you're going, and that transition between the two. Of 20 years is a long time. It can be positive and it can be negative, like you said, and COVID's allowed everyone to look at themselves and have that opportunity to go, okay, look, I can put down the music, or I can have the time now to reinvent it and make it more relevant and do it again. It seems to me like you guys have got such a strong bond together as a unit that it would be silly not to. And I get that everyone gets busy, everyone gets married, has kids or whatever, but it's good to see that you can put something down and still pick it up and still have that unified entity that is SkinInc. My next question is, did you make Shane audition? And how brutal were you on him auditioning? Because I know he was a friend with you before. Or was it a case of, rightio, mate, if you want the gig, learn the songs. If not, you're out? Like, how did that work?
There was actually an audition, and he passed with flying colours. All he had to do was to pull 6 bongs in a row.
This wasn't back in the 90s, right?
Oh, Shane, you said.
Yeah. Now, another thing that I was doing a little bit of research, and there was something that was quite bizarre. I've never ever seen this before on any sort of special edition footage. Corey's looking at me because he kind of knows where I'm going with this. Where you were or were not handing out, as part of limited edition CDs, actual pieces of the band members' skin.
You do this.
Legal ramifications are present.
Allegedly. Let's just put that in brackets.
No, absolutely, we did.
How Rockstar is that?
Our CD launch for our first EP was actually sponsored by the Tat Shop in Northbridge.
Oh, wow.
An old punk mate of mine, Dave Llewellyn, was working there as a tattoo artist at the time, and he did some work on me and stuff like that. And as my scabs were healing and falling off and stuff like that, I was collecting them and I'm putting them in a little baggie. And so when we released the EP, we thought, well, let's have a bit of fun with this. As I say, you got to have fun with rock and roll.
Yeah.
100%.
Be serious. So we said, as a limited collector's edition, you can actually get a piece of the band, with the SkinInc leftovers. And
He's got one.
No.
Yes, I love it. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Oh, look at that.
It's a bit of skin.
That is
it's a little plastic bag, and it says on here, "Thanks for purchasing this limited collector's edition of the SkinInc independent debut EP Love Me Tomorrow. Enclosed is your very own piece of the band, leftovers from their personal skin inkings. All members have signed your CD to complete the personalised touch for you." And it's got a little
Scabby.
Wow.
How brilliant.
little scabby bit in there.
Yeah.
That is so incredibly Rockstar. I love
And
it.
you know the worst thing, in 20 years' time when they've learnt to clone people, there could be another...
And you stop
100 Pauls running around.
Yeah, you guys can retire and just live off the royalties this clone band will be doing for you.
I remember, Paul, that we actually did the signing of those CDs in our tent at the big day out. Do you remember that?
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
that was, yeah.
How many CDs, out of curiosity, did you print up? Like, was there a magic number you thought, all right, we're going to do 500 of these and see how we go, or?
Yeah, no, look, we couldn't really afford a lot back in those days, so we only did 5,000, I think.
Wow,
All sold.
We've run out of skin. We've got 500 CDs here. Get the knife out. Come on.
that's a lot of tattoos, just saying. Now, there's also, we're doing a bit of research. You guys actually did a cover of a couple of other songs. Is that correct? Particularly on the, bonus tracks. Can you talk a little bit about those?
Go on, Corey.
Oh, well, we did Whip It on the first EP.
Yep.
That was the first cover we did. And then while we're recording the EP, the studio that we're at, Pinnacle? Was it Pinnacle?
Yeah, Pinnacle in Subi.
In Subiaco. After we'd finished doing our recording, our engineer at the time said, "Oh, look, I'm helping out with an AC/DC homegrown tribute CD." And so would you guys be keen on doing an AC/DC song and being part of that? So we did Touch Too Much and went back to that studio and did that song, got that down. And then they were doing an In Excess one.
Yes.
And they said, "Oh, would you guys be keen on doing an In Excess one as well?" So we went to another studio for that one though, didn't we?
Different one, yeah.
Yeah, with Adam Keane. Is that right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Up north of the river, I think it was.
Yeah. So we ended up doing Just Keep Walking by In Excess.
Oh, good song.
But that never got released. Like the AC/DC one got released, but the In Excess one got held back because at the time, if I remember rightly, Paul, In Excess were doing the In Excess looking for their singer TV show.
Yeah.
And the band actually stopped the release of that tribute EP coming out.
Wow.
So, we missed out on having that released, even though we did get a copy of it. And then Rose-Coloured Glasses, we did The Boys.
When You're Lonely.
When You're Lonely.
Yeah.
So I think, were they the only ones we've done? Yeah, 4.
Oh, I think.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we generally like to have, one cover on our releases that we do. So we're actually working on another cover now.
Yep.
Which I won't say what it is at this point. But,
Can you give us a hint?
Yeah, just...
Sorry, I had to ask.
It's all right. It's an Australian band.
Yep.
Another Australian band.
Yep.
So,
Excellent.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Narrows it down.
Yeah. It's not In Excess, I'm guessing. All right.
No.
We're going to have a very, very short break, and then we're going to come back and talk a bit about what's happening next for SkinInc. also the launch and the new song that's coming out on the 21st, and then also obviously also too a little bit about where you can grab your music and all that kind of stuff, and also the possibility of touring. Obviously, when COVID is, touch wood, in a better place, and you guys can actually physically get together and start punching out some of this music live. All right, guys, we'll be right back. You are listening and watching Live and Loose here in the Edge Entertainment Australia studios. I have Sean Bennett from the Rockpit and also Paul and Corey from SkinInc. We'll be back very, very shortly.